14th source for all geeky nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplin.
And we are your two overeducated codependent nerd hosts, bringing you things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, February 23rd, 2024. February. One of those months, one of those mouth feels. That's not fun.
Yeah. No, there's too much R.
Where did that? Do we know where that word came from? What's the etymology?
I actually think like most of the months, it's Roman.
Are you gonna blame the Romans, Andrew?
Well, and it's actually I was thinking about this. Like, I know most of the other ones make sense.
we just blame. They're just the scapegoats for history. Fucking fascism.
But it's like how is
bad
February
names.
Roman? Like, what were they choking on? Because I know most of the other months are. But yeah, so I whatever. It's worst spelled month.
Indeed.
In the year. In English.
I want to start off before we dive into it, Andrew. I got a quibble with your people.
My people?
Mm-hmm.
Yikes. Which people?
This could become a very different show very quickly. And of course, by your people, I mean Star Wars people. I know you don't like to think of yourself as such, but you are, Andrew, and you have to accept it. It's just that you are a real Star Wars fan in that you love all like the spin-off media, specifically the animated series stuff, which I think has the greatest traction of fandom at this point, like the Clone Wars, Rebels.
I don't know about that.
The Bad Batch, not the Bad Bitch as I wanted it to be.
That's a different show.
Actually, that kind of ties into what I wanted to briefly talk about at the beginning here. I liked from her appearance in Mandalorian, and the Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka Tano. I like Rosario Dawson a lot, and one of my biggest fears is because like part of the discussion, the discourse, even the promotion for the Ahsoka show on Disney Plus was that it's kind of like Rebels season 5? I don't know.
I think 5. Let's say 5.
And so one of the things I kept kind of probing my Star Wars friends would be like, is this a show I can watch? Mostly because I feel like most, if not all, of the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus so far have been pretty noob comforting in that you don't need to like be into capital I into Star Wars to enjoy those shows. Ahsoka's not working for us at all.
Yeah.
Let me say this. It definitely feels like we are missing a lot. The characters are cool. The relationships are clear. But like things are happening kind of fast, but also kind of slow. It definitely feels like it's not made for people like my wife and I. And it's a bummer. It's a bummer. And that kind of, I wanted to bring that to the table to kind of, because I don't feel like I've heard this part of the commentary on the show, because I think generally it's well regarded because it is definitely an olive branch to those folks that have liked Clone Wars and liked Rebels and like that whole aspect, the shows that are actually about wars in the stars. I don't begrudge that at all, and it's kind of part of the conversation that my wife and I had tonight watching the second episode of Ahsoka, because for a lot of shows, an hour-long show takes 2 hours to watch because we stop and talk about shit all the time. And we're like, what's the disconnect here? Because I kind of like everybody, but it's clearly not for us. And then part of the conversation was like, I can't begrudge that. Because why can't fans get their olive branch from Lucasfilm / Disney at this point as well, right? I don't know if you've heard from other people in my position about this show, but that's kind of like, I wanted to bring my experience to the table here. I think it's well made. The casting's great. The interactions and characters are fantastic, but it's clearly like there's a veil or a fog that's blocking me from the enjoyment I want to get, like I've gotten from a lot of the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus at this point.
Well, and so I would actually say entirely fair. Actually, I would say yes. I think what you're expressing is legitimate. Mm-hmm. However, I don't actually think it's unique to this show. I think the difference is Whereas other shows really relied on things that were like let's think about Obi-Wan. Imagine watching Obi-Wan without having seen episodes 1 through 3. You'd be like, who the fuck is this guy? Right. And that show doesn't help you, because it assumes you've seen it. And similarly, I think Andor, while I think you could watch it, it kind of no, you've seen Rogue One before you watch this, right?
Sure, yeah.
That's kind of, and I think the difference is that those were movies.
Yeah.
That you could see 1 or 2 of, whereas actually, no, very much Ahsoka, less Clone Wars, more Rebels.
Sure.
It really is. No, you kind of have, not have to, but you should have seen some of Rebels. Because literally, most of the cast are from Rebels, right?
Even David Tennant.
Right? Even David, well, no, he was in Clone Wars.
Sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, it's literally these people that they were in the show. And the whole story, the whole thing we're seeing is them continuing the story from that show.
Interesting.
So yeah, absolutely. And I would say that when, not a spoiler, I guess, when Ezra shows up, for me, watching it was oh damn, here's we're right. But if you've not seen Rebels, you're and who the fuck is this guy?
Well, I would say they do kind of are playing him up a bit because, oh God, I knew her name 10 seconds ago. The Mandalorian Padawan.
Right, Sabine Wren.
Yes. It's and David Tennant, the robot David Tennant has been oh, you got Ezra's lightsaber, but you've made modifications to it, therefore it's yours. And again, spoilers for episode 2 of Ahsoka. And so they're kind of building up the character to the point where I think even my wife and I would be oh, we're hearing about this Ezra guy a lot. Though I think it would still be quite a reveal for him to show up in the show. I think that they're definitely pointing to it, but I can see if there is extra build up for the character from those previous shows, it could have even more of an impact. Right now, it's just Chekhov's property of Ezra's lightsaber.
Yeah. Well, and to me, again, I think if you didn't have any context, his reveal is oh yeah, that's the guy you were looking for. Yeah, okay, good, good show.
Right.
Whereas, again, as someone who saw the original show, it's no, that's that was, he literally did this thing at the end of the show, whatever. I've seen him grow up from being the punk kid they found on Lothal. So one of the things, the whole idea that Sabine lives in this place on Lothal, this planet, that's Ezra's old, essentially, house. That's where he used to live.
That weird little tower thing? Yeah.
Yeah, that tower thing. That's literally where, when Rebels started, that's where we see him. Right? The idea that
he's is he a main character of Rebels?
Absolutely, yeah. He is one of the there's 5 of them, but he's kind of the kid that becomes the Padawan to Kanan Jarrus, sorry.
How dare you?
Who's not in the show. Due to death. Spoiler.
There's a bit of frustration on my wife's part because she's she wants to get in the show because it seems to be a woman-led Star Wars show, but it's kind of impenetrable, Right. And I don't have much more context than she does, but because I'm a nerd, I know a lot. I've internalized a lot more Star Wars than I want to or need to, and I have for some reason I can remember stupid details, but not enough to even give her context for what I'm seeing.
No, absolutely. I don't think it's unfair to say, first of all, that Rebels actually is a really good show.
Sure. Yeah.
Even without the context of Clone Wars, it is, I actually think, probably one of the better Star Warses that's been done. But it's really, it's almost absolutely required viewing for Ahsoka. I don't think Ahsoka makes sense. I would actually argue that it's easier to skip The Mandalorian than it is Rebels, right? Because the shit in The Mandalorian was just kind of yeah, I guess she met a little Yoda and shit. You know, like, yeah, she had some adventures. She, hung out with Luke, I guess.
Posed cool. Yeah.
But none of that matters. What that show starts with is, did you see Rebels? Like, it may as well be called Star Wars, Did You See Rebels? So yeah, no, absolutely.
And would you say, can you watch Rebels without watching the Clone Wars?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first season, absolutely. The second season starts to, like, I guess not spoiler. The end of the first season introduces Ahsoka, and that's kind of the first, like, from a previous show.
Oh, okay.
Season 2 has a few other people who I won't mention, but it's still like it's about this family, the rebels, right? You now have seen Sabine, you've seen, I believe, Mom, Hera,
right,
and you know that Ezra's a character, and then there's Kanan, and then Zeberillios, who you saw in, without realizing it, in Mandalorian season 3.
Oh, is he the guy at the bar?
The big purple guy, yeah. So that is basic, and then Chopper, who I've
seen Chopper, yeah.
So really, it's a show, like, it's about the Star Wars, but it really is about this family, right? Is this kind of found family. So yeah, you don't need the context. Like I said, they have some characters from the previous shows or from other things. Like there is a character who shows up, you'll be like, oh, that guy, right? But it doesn't. They're more contextual. They're more like, or whatever. They're like, yeah, this is a person from the Star Wars legacy, but you don't really need to know who it is to understand this show. At least that's my take.
Yeah, generally that's been the approach to these Lucasfilm or Disney Plus Star Wars shows. It's like characters show up, but their import is revealed in the episode that they are a context or a part of the context for, right? Like what was that bounty hunter guy with the wide brim hat and like the red eyes?
Right. Yeah.
Outside of, I'm sure he has, as we know, like he has outside context, but for the context of his appearance in the show, they gave us all the information we needed to make it a memorable moment in its own right. And it is more like a wink and a nod to those fans. I think the biggest giveaway that this is for not just the casual fan, Ahsoka, I mean, is not just for the casual fan, is how often they go to that mural they've painted, clearly in the art style of Rebels. And like, oh, this is definitely for that fandom.
Well, and I would actually say to that, I actually think there's a scene from, I think, the end of the first episode. It's a recreation of a scene from the end of Rebels.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Where it's kind of, because Rebels ends with like, oh, stuff happens, and then they kind of flash forward to stuff that's happening more around this era. Mm-hmm. And actually, the scene of Ahsoka with Sabine, that's actually essentially a recreation of this scene from the end of the original Rebels.
Gotcha.
What I would say is, feel free, like for you and Nicole, to put it on pause. I would recommend, I think Rebels is, while I like the Clone Wars, Rebels did what the Clone Wars did, but I think better. And it actually had a lot of like really great moments in Star Wars in terms of like, I say like one of I think there's a really iconic lightsaber battle from Rebels, which I don't want to spoil. But it's to the point where one of my friends says it's the best lightsaber fight ever. Spoiler: it lasts about 7 seconds.
Better than Yoda versus Dooku?
Well, because it's very old school. Like, no, this is a one swing, one stroke fight, and someone dies.
That's pretty great,
right?
Yeah.
And it is very like, it is this very iconic. Like, no, that's actually how probably a lot of these samurai fought. Which is why it's like, and it's with really important characters. You're like, damn, you just did that. So I would say, to me, Rebels, and then of course it introduced Thrawn as a character and made him part of the universe officially, but also like really sold the fact that, yeah, man, if they just listened to him,
yeah.
They would have won, right? Like it's actually there's this kind of moment where because Rogue One was coming out, they kind of contrast that the whole Rogue One, like the building of the Death Star, was this other guy's idea. Thrawn had this other idea, which we find out like, well, shit, that would have been better. Like, you're right. That, in fact, probably would have won. But again, it's like, wow, you didn't listen to him because he's blue. You know, racism. But no, I would say that for me, I think Rebels, it is, I would say it's on Disney Plus, right? It is, yeah. You don't have to watch Clone Wars. You can just watch it. It's pretty self-contained. It's got some really, it's got Freddie Prinze Jr., it's got other people.
But it's 4 seasons of TV show.
4 seasons of a 30-minute animated series, which is short.
I'm guessing
like
maybe
that.
20. Is it like standard season length, like 22 episodes, or? I'm guessing probably less.
Let's see. Episodes 4, 15, 22, 22, 16. I don't know what 4 is. Shorts? I never
Miniseries,
watched
clearly,
those.
yeah. Did you look up Rebels or did you look up Clone Wars?
Yeah, I looked up Rebels. Okay. So let's just say 15, 22, 22, 16.
That's not bad. 22's. That's just pushing the limit of our level. I don't know if I could convince Nicole to watch that, but
oh sure. What I'd say is try the pilot though. They have a 2-part premiere, and I think what I liked about it as a show was the fact that they. Part of it was that the characters were created kind of like on original concept sketches. So Zebarilios, the weird purple dude, was based on original concept
Chewbacca,
sketches of Chewbacca.
Yeah.
But they also there's other things like the fact that Kanan Jarrus, the ostensible Jedi, who basically, without saying too much, he was essentially a Padawan that escaped when Order 66 was called, and essentially has been hiding. He's kind of pitched as like where the Jedi are samurai. He certainly does that, but he's also a bit of a cowboy.
Right.
Like, so there's the scene where he basically, for the whole pilot, he's just the blaster toting guy that drives the ship.
Right.
And then there's a scene where like, oh shit, we're in over our heads. He's like, all right. And he literally assembles his lightsaber like that he's had disassembled because like, I don't do this anymore. And then he's like, all right, let's go.
So it's Ralph McQuarrie, the show?
So, but I would say like, and they have some ups and downs and they do a lot of like,
of course, yeah.
They do some, I would say like some really, to me, things I like about like just kind of the Empire and yeah, there are the total douche canoes that are like, yeah, Empire, but then like the idea that there's some people who maybe aren't all the way in on it and kind of like, oh, maybe they have second thoughts. They also really, they have a whole thing where they kind of address, but what about the clones, ? Because they have a whole thing where they basically find some old clones who weren't just like, I guess, absorbed.
Is it the Bad Batch, Andrew?
No.
Oh.
No, it's different. Although they're it's all connected, right?
Right.
But like the idea that they basically bring back kind of some of the clone characters from the Clone Wars, but with the idea being like, oh, but they figured it out before it happened. And just the idea of like, oh, but what does that mean, right? Like, who are these people now that were clones built for fighting and now they're not? Like, no, I would say, yeah, definitely, absolutely. I would say, please, if you guys can get it, I'd say watch the pilot. And if you don't like it, then just come back next week and say, well, that was a big sack of shit. And that's fine. That's okay.
I don't think we'd say that is not what we're ready to pick up. But like, actually, the question I guess I'm most interested right now is, as a fan of Clone Wars and Rebels, and seeing as how you're probably the prime audience for Ahsoka, what did you think ultimately of Ahsoka? Did you enjoy it? Because it's a Filoni, like it is a capital F Filoni joint, right?
I mean, yeah, it's a show. It's fine. It's not. It's no. It's the problem is it's not a standalone show.
Regardless of that, like For you as a fan.
I mean, it literally ends with what's happening either in the movie or in the whatever. And as I've gotten older, I want your show, and maybe I've been poisoned or mistreated by Leverage, which like that show, every season they make it like it's the last, right? I don't want a show that expects me to tune in next season.
I did read that Ahsoka did get the green light for a season 2.
Oh, sure. Or a movie. He's also doing a movie like Mandalorian and whatever.
Because it's Dave Filoni. Like,
sure, right. Like, and that's
the guy
fine.
that saved Star Wars from George Lucas.
No, I'd say from J.J. Abrams.
Damn.
But, like, that's fine. I want my show, like, wrap it up, right? Like, it's okay to have like a thing, like a post credits, like, oh, here's the next season, or even leave some threads kind of open. Mm-hmm. But I want the show to end on a way where if the show gets canceled, good. We had a good ending. We feel good. Like, I don't want you to make The Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and then get fucking canceled.
Well, God, like, not to like just dive into this topic, but like, I found, especially, I've been thinking about this. We've talked about this in the past where I think I've had a very different opinion, but times change as do ages and tastes. But like, I agree with you. Like, I would rather have like a season be a concise, yes, I'd prefer a concise, but also self-contained kind of unit of storytelling. But I'm also getting to the point where I'm like, I would like episodes to do that again too. I think we look at like something like Buffy, tread that line pretty well of like each episode is its own story. Like there's a beginning, middle, and end that does contribute to an overall narrative that is taking place. And I kind of yearn for that kind of storytelling again. I say that because I was at work talking to a coworker who was frustrated that I hadn't finished the new season of True Detective. But as anybody that knows me knows, I take forever to watch TV because I value my time. Not that you don't, bingers, but you just value it in a different way, and that's valid as well. She asked, like, so what episode did you finish? I'm like, well, episode 4. She's like, what happened in that? I'm like, it's a show that's definitely, each episode is just, well, we had 50 minutes and that we told 50 minutes of the story.
Right. I have a supporting for this that I have to unload right now.
Sure.
I was watching the last season of 24 with Kiefer Sutherland on like Netflix. Right. And I was X episodes into it. Don't ask why I was watching it. I had to make bad choices.
Is this recently?
And this was like 10 years ago.
I was going to say, I'm like, geez, that's...
But it got pulled from Netflix.
Oh, no.
And it went to like some other service. And I'm like, but I have no idea what fucking episode I was on.
You didn't know which hour you were in?
Right. Like, and you're right. At least that show has hours, right? But still, I had no idea. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to delete this show from my brain because I'm not going to like try to guess like, oh, was it hour 4 or was it hour 5? Like, I don't want to watch 3 episodes of fucking Kiefer Sutherland torturing people that are brown just so I can figure out where I was. So I think actually that yes, that's actually I agree with you that there are a lot of these shows where, in fact, actually I think it's True Detective Night Country. The episodes are just called episode 4.
Yeah.
All right. What happened to like we have cool like Shakespearean titles like the wren who steals the robin's nest or whatever. Like I don't
go back 7 years and us talking about a show evangelizing serialized television.
Oh sure.
One of the more modern examples of what got me back onto episodic television was actually watching Mad Men and seeing how well crafted that show was. And like each episode had a theme and a story that was going through while also contributing to the overall season arc. Right. And that it can be done. It's not like television has to be a 10-hour movie.
Right.
Well, that is certainly warranted in some stories. It's not warranted or necessary for every story, which makes me appreciate and be more forgiving of something like the much reviled recent seasons of Doctor Who. I'm like, well, at least they're telling stories, you know? And like, if one is bad, the next one might be less bad or might be good. And if a season is just dragging and kind of this goes back kind of like to Ahsoka, like again, It's not that it's bad. I'm not saying it's bad at all. It's just it's definitely not made for me and my household.
Right.
And not saying that every show has to be for me, of course, but like every other Star Wars show that has come to Disney Plus has been not necessarily for me, but definitely not pushed me
against
away.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, kind of going back to what I said earlier is, yes, it is very much Rebel season 5.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is put Ahsoka aside. I really would say Rebels is a solid show. I think it not only does it do kind of the Star Wars, like these literally, you see the birth of the rebellion, right? You see kind of like this like, how did we get to where we are in Star Wars: A New Hope, right?
Rebels has Anakin and stuff like that, right?
No,
Where does Rebels slot in timeline wise?
It is X years before Star Wars: A New Hope.
That's interesting because Clone Wars was all about Obi-Wan and Anakin, right?
Yeah.
And it's cool that the sort of ostensible sequel show is about, or is focusing on all original characters.
Yes.
That's cool.
And they make no mistake, they bring back people like in the first season. I think there's an episode with like C-3PO and R2-D2, which is like kind of like, what the fuck are you doing here?
Yeah, it's Jay and Silent Bob. We got to have him in every movie.
There's an episode with Billy D. Williams reprising Lando in another like, and what the fuck? However, there are a lot of like, and there's certainly people from Clone Wars they bring back, other characters I won't name. But just the idea, it's about this group of 5 or 6 people and how they become like, they start essentially as like a small cell of just them. But we see as it grows, like we see the rebellion grow to the point where by the the end of the 4th season, you start to see like, oh wow, like because they did a crossover or tie into Rogue One. We even see what's his name, Forrest Whitaker makes an appearance as a slightly younger version of the character he plays in Rogue One. And we kind of see like, already there's like that friction. Saw Gerrera, which then I guess ties into Andor because he's also there. I think just the idea of seeing like, how does this, how do we get to what we see in A New Hope?
Right.
The things that were just assumed, like we see the growth, we see mentions of things that other shows have touched on, right? Like Obi-Wan has. We see what's his name? Actually, I guess technically Obi-Wan is before Rebels because Leia's a very young girl.
Yes.
Where in Rebels she does appear in an episode as like a 14, 15-year-old. I would say like I definitely to me Rebels does kind of represent like I guess maybe what I wanted Star Wars to always be.
So is that if we were to like hierarchy all the Star Wars shit, would Rebels be at the top for you?
I very much enjoy it. Clone Wars I like to a certain extent. Rogue One is to me like my favorite movie because it's about a fucking Star War. Like spoiler. And then other stuff like Andor I like. I think The Mandalorian does really great with it's just a Western,
Yeah. Especially those first 2 seasons, yeah.
Right. And yeah, I'm the weird guy that like, man, when I talk about Star Wars, I never mention the original trilogy.
Right.
That's for me. Like, that's not what attracted me to it. That's not what got me into it.
That seems to be like with Ahsoka and as a sort of insinuating with Rebels before it, like also it's not necessarily a human dominant cast of characters as well, which is what the movies are known for as well. It's like, look at these beautiful blonde people basically going around and being heroes. It's cool. It is cool, and I want to appreciate it, and I do respect it at the very least. But like, yeah, it feels like I'm missing a lot.
Yeah, there's what's it? Someone I read somewhere someone referred to it as like the cantina effect, where like right, that one scene in Star Wars: A New Hope where they go to the cantina and you see all these exotic, different aliens, And except that we're now going to follow the show where it's just, or the movie where it's just about these white folks.
Right.
Whereas like Rebels certainly was like, well, actually it's already a very like diverse group of characters from across the galaxy.
It's like the cantina scene, but with 100% less jizz.
Are you what's it, jizz whaler? Is that what they're called?
That's what they call me. So for those that don't know, hold on. Let me
Sorry, before someone's like, whoa, this took a jump. The band everyone thinks of as the Cantina Band, it's like, it's, something.
What do we call space jazz, Andrew?
I believe it's jizz, right?
Oh, is that what we call it? Of course it is.
Jizz whaler is what a musician who specialized in playing jizz songs. Max Rebo and his band, Max Rebo being the leader of, God, I can't even believe I'm reading Wikipedia to say this. They often played jizz whaler standards.
Sure.
Oh no, Max Rebo's the blue elephant guy. Oh my goodness, I mixed up my jizz whalers.
If you had one role in this show, Andrew, if you had one category in which to keep your shit together and knowledge intact.
It's about jizz whalers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got it wrong. I can't tell a jizz whaler from a whatever the other thing is.
It's offensive, honestly.
Yeah, so that's a great intro. So I think, Dan, you and I want to talk about our respective weeks in geek, right?
No, I think we're good.
It's okay because I don't have a week in geek. So, spoiler, I haven't done anything that's geeky.
I mean, honestly, that was my engaging intro, and it turned out to be an entire episode.
A whole episode. But it's fair. Like, actually, what I do want to go back to your original question of like this show. I suspect your opinion is not unique. I actually suspect a lot of people who haven't seen Rebels, because they're like, why would I watch this cartoon? You sit down to watch that show and you're like, what am I watching? Like, what is this? It feels like I missed something. Yeah, you missed Rebels. But they don't, I mean, honestly, at this point, it has a little bit of Marvelosis.
Right.
Like, oh, are you trying to watch, Marvel show number 7? Have you not seen 6 movies plus 2 other series? Well, then eat shit.
It's funny with the recent trailer for Deadpool and Wolverine. Oh, have you not seen Loki? That might be important to watch Deadpool and Wolverine.
Right. Which, although we'll see how that works out.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. Like, oh, the TVA. You're like, the what? Oh, I don't watch those TV shows.
I think the contrast is this.
That movie's a joke? Yeah.
How dare you? But
no, I mean, it's different to lean that hard into other shit and play it as a joke, as opposed to, no, absolutely not. If you want to watch this show, you have to have seen 4 seasons of an animated show, and maybe 5 seasons of another animated show, and maybe also seen these other 3 movies, and or I just won't watch the show.
But I think there's an interesting difference there. I think when it comes to the Marvel effect, I think a lot of people just kind of, if there's that amount of homework, for lack of a better word, behind it, they just kind of write off the movie or TV show as being bad. And there's something to watching 2 episodes now of Ahsoka. I'm like, I like all these characters. I want to be on board, but the show is preventing me from doing that. And if anything, it makes a pretty good argument, though they're not presenting it very as forward as maybe they should, saying like, yo guys, you might want to go watch your Rebels first. I think maybe there's the Filoni, integer of it all, right? Where like he's in control here, which makes it much more compelling than kind of the disparate, kind of jigsaw puzzle nature of a lot of Marvel stuff, where it's all these creators abstractly working together to create this tapestry.
Well, and who knows? Like, while I realize that I like Dave Filoni's work, I also accept the fact that it's weird because I came to Star Wars. Well, I saw the original movies and the sequel or the prequels. I never considered myself a big Star Wars person until I came to Dave Filoni's work. To the point where now I'm like the drooly weirdo who's like, yeah, I love the Labrador, and it's weird because when I meet like old school Star Wars people, like, oh, I only see the movies. I'm like, oh, really?
They're fine.
Or then other people who come at me with books, I'm like, oh, yeah, I read one of those.
Well, it's funny. I read in the Wikipedia article for Ahsoka that Filoni consulted with who's the
Timothy Zahn.
Yeah, Timothy Zahn about the Thrawn stuff to make sure it all lined up, which is a nice kind of spit in the face of the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm,
especially with the sequel trilogy. Where did you consult with anybody? Any of you? Any of you?
Right.
So I think, I guess what I would say is I would certainly propose it's a 2-part pilot. I don't know how it's presented on Disney Plus. I'd say give that one a whirl, and if you guys watch it, you're like, you know what, not your thing, then put both Rebels and Ahsoka down, and feel good about putting it down. I'm gonna say as someone who like, I guess I'm into this shit. Like, it's okay to, hey, actually, that's not my thing. Same what I do. I normally tell people about Voyager. Like, give it a few episodes and then be comfortable putting it down.
It just sucks with, like they said, that kind of female forward cast, which is kind of an anomaly amongst the Disney Plus Star Wars shows. That like, oh, this is the one you have to do homework for,
right?
And I was like, fuck,
Well, it's an anomaly amongst all Star Wars. Right?
And you know what? Probably we could push through and probably still get enjoyment out of it. I think that's also the thing I want to say. Like, I think we are enjoying the show, but like we know we're not missing, but like we're just, a lot of stuff is going over our heads.
Now, the one thing I will say, because the show does introduce new characters, specifically I forget his name, the weird kind of like not a Jedi but former Jedi, played by Ray Stevenson, who unfortunately he died.
The bad guy,
and his sidekick.
Yeah.
I will tell you that like his character, I think a lot of people actually walked away from that show saying like, wow, actually that's the character we want to see, like what's going on with that. It's actually really unfortunate he died because it was kind of one of the most, because you've seen a little bit that like he basically is like, well, I was a Jedi, but like kind of fuck them, but not in the same way we see other people say that. Like it was like this weird kind of stoic, maybe you guys were wrong and I'm still finding the answer, but maybe I do some bad stuff. And I was like, God, man, that's some like, because the whole Force light side, dark side stuff is kind of like a bunch of horse shit. And to have him kind of call it out is like, oh, wow, like I do things differently because of the things that have happened. And I really, God, I want to see that show in which apparently they resurrect the actor and make it.
With either the
no, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see
it. Or they could like do like a prequel series where they recast him with a younger actor.
And don't be wrong, you can always recast, right? Like,
of course,
right? You can. I just hope if they do and they continue that story, they find someone.
It'll be Chris Pratt.
It's a me, Darth Boopido, or whatever his name is.
Watch me command a velociraptor.
That was actually, I would say the one thing Ahsoka, that was the character that really I was like, wow, this is, because it was original for that show, and it felt like, wow, this is the, like, for me, as someone who's kind of critical of Star Wars, and it's very like, bicolor narrative of like, oh, the light side, the dark side, and we've talked about actually like how sometimes it flirts a little bit with it, but then I was like, nope, there's just the one and the other. And he was kind of like, oh wait, are you gonna live in the gray?
Which actually, like, not to expose how nerdy I am. I listened to recently over the course of many months, because they released an episode, I think once a month, of a group of nerds playing through educated, thoughtful, analytical podcast, actually originally about watching and talking about Star Wars Rebels, called A More Civilized Age, of some some folks playing through the first Knights of the Old Republic game, which also seemed to deal with similar themes. And to the point where like I should play these games, and then I bought them on my Switch, and then I started playing one. I'm like, oh no, this is antiquated and unplayable. But what I'm saying is it speaks to your point where like it's not the main Star Wars media that's engaging with the actual themes of Star Wars in interesting and novel ways. It's kind of like not the side stories, but like let's just call it extended universe that's doing interesting and unique things and actually probing these ideas in ways that a lot of fans want this stuff to continue, which is like, let's make it complicated. Let's make it difficult. And let's expose characters to this new approach to what was previously, like you said, like a more binary kind of storytelling. Binary.
Sorry,
yep.
This transitioned to a Doctor Who reference.
Yep. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topic we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us in other social media as well, specifically the places that Andrew and I frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram at dbethelcomics, and you can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark@dice.camp.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube, or you may already be there because you are listening to our show, which is simulcast in YouTube. If you are listening on YouTube, or I guess watching, listening.
Not much to watch.
That's to say,
stare at a static image. If you want.
Static image. If you are listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disc of Medusae, the other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music and more at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution License.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review. Whether a text review or using the proprietary metric will spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. I was talking to a friend of the show and on-the-ground Marvel correspondent, Kyron Silva, and I was bandying about an idea for either a podcast or maybe even a feature we could do on our show. It's called Say Something Nice, where maybe once a month we agree to watch what is generally considered a bad movie.
Okay, what's the start?
We have to come to the show and say something nice about it, while also saying why it's fucking terrible. This all kind of came out of, okay, so Kyron sent me a link because he'd found out about that proposed animated Doctor Who series that was clearly based on like Mobius style art. It was kind of like weird, like future sci-fi kind of stylings, and it reminded me a lot of the art style from the Highlander animated series. And he's like, oh, yes, I remember that. I'm like, yeah, it was based on the abominable Highlander 2. But that got me thinking, I was like, what if I forced others to watch that movie and we had to come to some microphones and say something nice about it? I'm like, you know what? That's a premise for a solid show. Maybe we should actually cut this out and save it for later. I don't know. If we are running low on ideas, maybe we could watch Highlander 2, the Quickening.
The Sickening, yeah.
Director's cut, because we want to have all of the context.
Actually,
which doesn't actually help.
I love the fact that like there are different versions that kind of fundamentally change like the narrative of the film in like kind of big stupid ways. And you're like, wow, a director's cut doesn't normally, in my mind, like completely restructure the story you're telling.
Right.
You know? But with that movie.
So who knows? We could keep that in our back pocket, Andrew, if we are in dire need of a topic some week and we could just pre-plan and watch some comes classic
Classic.
Highlander 2. In the news, they were recently saying people, apparently scientists, or I think private scientists.
Private scientists?
Private scientists. They don't like to talk about it. No, private sector scientists talking about like building a sun shield.
Oh, I know.
And like, I'm like, that got me actually thinking, like, that's kind of the premise of Highlander 2. Is that the future we want?
No, to the point where I will tell you, in science class in high school, we watched, you weren't in the class, it was some other, I don't know what the class was, Integrated Science 2 or some shit. I remember watching a documentary that literally opened with the introduction to Highlander 2.
There we go.
Like about, the hole in the ozone layer, the one thing that humanity's collectively fixed that was so bad that they made a fucking bullshit movie about it.
I think the only class we had together was the art class in junior high.
It's been a long time.
The Clayman incident.
Nope, we're moving away. All right. Anyway. So anyway, thank you for listening.
So until you watch a bad movie and have to say something nice about it, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
Oh God, I knew her name 10 seconds ago. The Mandalorian Padawan.
Oh, that's shit.
You knew it 10 seconds ago as well. She's just cut off her hair.
Right.
We are bad people. Andrew's definitely not Googling this.
I'm not Googling this. Damn. Here we are. We're just fucking lighting it off, and it's only 3 minutes, 30 seconds in.
Oh, I guess we could say this, and if you like the show and like to help us out, the best...
Just wrap it up. We're done.
It's just an outtake show this week, dear listeners.
No, we need Dan talking about the shit he loves.
Oh, God.
Which is...
how to lose all our fucking listeners.
No, it's
so
all
right.
right.
The Postman, right? Is a great time.
Or as we prefer, Il Postino. You really love rural activities in February.
Do you know what I did in February, Andrew? I spent all my time in the library looking up rural judicial decisions.
Rural juror.
We already had that episode title, I'm sure.
Damn it. I think we did.
Maybe twice.
Let's go for a third.